All right, Chief. So we'll roll into this. So tell us about yourself. How'd you get into the fire service?
Well, I've been asked that question a couple times, and man, I got to tell you, I can't ever remember wanting to do anything other than be a fireman. I told the story a couple of weeks ago. I actually went into the service in 1976 so that I could get out and claim the 5 veterans points for the FDNY test. I mean,
Wow,
that's all
okay.
that's all I ever thought about doing was being a fireman. And, both the times I got out of the service, I was getting ready to get out of the service. They weren't giving the test. So I just re-enlisted, and over the course of time, I ended up, going to work for county EMS down there in North Carolina, and then moved over to the fire side. But, from being a little kid, man, this is all I've ever wanted to do. I'm not really sure what drew me to the fire service, but the first opportunity I had, I got involved, and from that point forward, I just said, "Hey, man, this is where I belong. This is a good fit for me. This is what I want to do." And as I got older, and I really started to appreciate what the service was really about and what we were tasked with doing, I just said, "Man, how could you want to do anything but this?" So that's the only way I can answer the question.
That's awesome. Was there anybody in your family that was a fireman?
Nope, I'm the first
Really?
one.
Just cold turkey.
I'm the
Wow.
first. Yeah, I broke the ground, and my sister ended up being a volunteer. She went into the volunteers. I grew up in Patchogue on Long Island, out on the South Shore, just east of the city, and my sister ended up marrying one of the officers at Vanguard Hose Company, and then she went into the volunteers. But me and her are the only two in my family that have got any type of connection to the fire service. We're it.
No kidding.
Is there something that when you were a kid uh, kind of influenced you?
I just thought it was a cool thing. I just, when I was a little kid, man, the big red truck and the sirens and, getting to, run up and down the road and do all that type of stuff. I mean, like I said, I grew up on an island, so, the volunteer department was a big thing, parades on, Memorial Day and 4th of July and, race, the fire department racing teams were a big thing back when I was coming up in the 70s. So, we had a track in town and I'd see the guys practicing. I just thought, man, this is just so cool, man. And then as I got older, as I got into junior high and high school, I realized that, I could do this for a living in New York City. So I started thinking about it. And at the time, they give the test, hundreds, 100,000 people would take the test. So it's like, man, how do I get an advantage? So I started doing some research. You go in the Army, go in the service, aim branch, and you get 5 veterans points. And that's where it all started. But I can't think of any one thing that pushed me to say this is what I want to do. It's just a combination of everything. I remember when I was growing up. This is before pagers or anything, and they had the sirens and the whistles would go off, and we still had street boxes in town, so you could count. You could count the whistle, the whistle blast, and figure out. I had a chart. I knew where the street boxes were. So I'd jump on my bike. I'd look at the chart. 543 is the intersection of Medford and Oak. So I'd jump on my bike and ride over to the intersection of Medford and Oak, and just kind of watch the fire trucks. So, and that never left me. The older I got, the more the more drive and ambition I had to make that a big part of my life. And then, once I got into the career, it just got better and better. And then I started to promote And that just opened a whole new set of doors of the things I was able to do, in training and mentoring and coaching and all that. Excuse me, all that other stuff, and it just got better by the day.
Outstanding.
That's
So
awesome.
where did you get started in the fire service?
Patchogue, Long Island. As a junior, I was 16 years old, and I went on the juniors, and I stayed on the juniors until I went into the service. And once I got through training or whatever, I spent 2 years in the 82nd Airborne, and we were just in the field all the time, man. It was just there was no, that was really your life. When I re-enlisted, I went on flight status as a medic. I moved off post, and I started volunteering in Spring Lake. And from there, I moved closer to post. I went to Bonnie Doon, a little community called Bonnie Doon, and I volunteered there. And I eventually ended up starting to work there part time. So, and then from there, I just kind of worked my way. I worked my way back to Jersey, and then that's a whole nother chapter.
Oh, take us to Jersey.
Yeah, so I spent a couple years in North Carolina, kind of bouncing around. I went to Durham, North Carolina, as a fireman when they first broke up the public safety department. Durham was like the big public safety department in the state, and it just didn't really pan out for them. So they split it into police and fire, and I was in the first class that they hired as firefighters to restaff the old Durham Fire Department. And I spent 5 years there, and I ended up going to Cherry Hill, New Jersey as a captain, a training officer for one of the fire districts. And then I stayed up there for 18 years. During that time, we took 6 independent fire districts and we merged them into one fire department. I was the training officer, spent some time in training, went back out on the line as a captain for about a year, took the Battalion Chief's test. The first time they ever gave the Battalion Chief's test, I took the test and I ended up coming out number one. I got made, spent 9.5 years as a battalion chief, and then I retired. We moved to North Carolina. My wife's parents were living up in the mountains, and her dad had passed away, and she wanted to be close to her mom, so we moved to North Carolina. But that's when I went to work for Blackwater. I spent 3 years in Iraq and Afghanistan doing some work with Blackwater Security. Came back from there, and then that's when the whole fire chief thing started. I ended up going to Sunrise Beach, Missouri for 7 years as a fire chief. I went out to Davis, California for a couple of years as an ops chief. I went to Pittsburg, Kansas for 2 years as a fire chief. And, all my fire chief buddies told me, you're going to wake up one day and you're going to say, man, this is the day. And I woke up and, I was 65 years old. And I said, this is the day. Because we'd already bought a house down here at the beach, and this is where we were going to end up anyhow. But originally I was going to work for like two more years or whatever, and I just woke up one day and it was time for a change. And I don't know at that point. I think that I'd done all that I could have done for the Pittsburgh Fire Department, and I think chiefs get to that point. You've done all that you can. Your shelf life is at zero now, and a lot of chiefs don't realize that, and they stay too long. I just woke up and said, this is a good time for me to go, and I retired, and now I live here at the beach, and I just I run my company. I have a small company. I travel around. I teach, speak at seminars and conferences, and so that's where I am now.
That's a pretty incredible career.
Very impressive. Yeah.
It's I pinch myself. One of these days, I tell myself, one of these days I'm going to wake up and the dream's going to be over with. I'm going to have to go to work, digging ditches or, driving a dump truck or something. Because when I look back at the 50 years, it's like, man, I don't think it could have been any better. I mean, certainly, there's been some tough times and some, bumps along the road, but hell, everybody has them. All in all, man, 50 years has just been a gift every day.
Yeah, if I can sign up for that right now, I will. That's incredible.
It's not bad, man. It's not bad.
No, doesn't sound like it.
Yeah.
So
it's truly an inspiration to hear that.
How was the merger in Cherry Hill? Because James and I are both from Jersey. We have a little idea of what it is now, but definitely not where you guys came from.
Oh man, it was it was something. It was the right thing at the right time. There were some politics that played into it that made it very, very difficult. There were some personalities that played into it. I mean, at the time, there were 4 or 5 career district fire chiefs. So when you merge, there's only going to be one fire chief. So you all can connect those dots any way you want, man.
Yeah.
There were 5 different contracts. There were like 3 different work schedules. We had some companies that had a very heavy volunteer presence. We had some companies that had no volunteer presence, and it was all career. So there were a lot of things that we had to work through, and it took a while, man. There were some, there were some ruffled feathers on certain sides of the aisle. So it took some time to kind of smooth them out. It took some time to really create the vision for the future and put the things in place that we had to put in place to get us there. I mean, one of the biggest things that we had going for us is Roger Allshafer had retired as the commissioner in Philadelphia, and he had actually moved over to Cherry Hill a couple years before the merge, and he ended up taking a district chief's job in Cherry Hill, so that when we merged, he became our chief. And I think that you talk about putting the right person in the right place at the right time. I mean, Roger did so much to get us on a sound footing and really position us for the future. I mean, I just can't say enough. I mean, he promoted me. I mean, he was the fire chief, and he's the one that promoted me to battalion chief. So,
Okay.
it was just it was something.
What year was that? What year did the whole thing start?
No, the whole thing started. So I went there in like '89. So all this jumped off in like '92, '93, I guess. Yeah,
Okay.
somewhere about 92, '93, somewhere along there, jumped off.
Say,
I mean, when
30 years.
yeah, when we merged, I mean, we had different hose loads on engines. You'd have 3 engines on a box assignment, and they'd pull up, and there were 3 different hose loads. I mean, somebody had a flat, somebody had the triple load, somebody else had a reverse horseshoe on their engine. I mean, you'd move guys around. When we started out, I mean, we didn't have a big career staff, so we're having to move guys to different firehouses for coverage. You walk through the door and you look at the rig, and it's like, how does this come off of the rig? I've never seen this hose load before, so it was crazy. I mean, we had some companies that were really dialed in; they were kind of rock solid, and then we had some companies that were more of a social kind of hang out in the firehouse type thing. Out the bells ring, we'll go to a fire and see what happens. So all those different pieces and parts had to be put together in a unified organization that was moving in one direction. And Roger did a lot. Roger did a lot to make that happen. So, and then fortunately, I was promoted probably a year and a half after the merge. So we were still really young, and I became battalion chief. So I had a lot. I had an opportunity to have influence on that process, and man, I'm so thankful for that, because it just taught me so much on how to make decisions, how to lead people, how to craft a vision, how to build a team. I mean, I talk about that stuff now in seminars and some of the presentations and some of the programs that my company does. Man, I'm leaning back to like 1995, 1996 and drawing examples, talking about them today in 2025. So it was something, man. It was something. And like I said, for you guys that are in Cherry Hill, I mean, you see Cherry Hill now, and man, I'll tell you what, it's 30 years sounds like a long time, but if you were there when I was there and you see what it is now, it's like, wow, how did this happen in just 30 years? I mean, there are places. I mean, I was back in Cherry Hill a couple months ago, just kind of looking around, visiting, talking to friends and whatever. I mean, and I know this from just traveling around the country. I mean, there's places they struggle with these issues for 50, 60 years, and you're still trying to, craft that unified vision. And man, the folks in Cherry Hill, they're just doing it every day, man. They're just doing it every day. I'm so proud to have been afforded the opportunity to be part of what it was, helping to get it where it is today. So,
yeah, I just went to hazmat tech with 3 Cherry Hill guys, and they're top notch dudes. They were on everything. They were recently hired too, and you could tell that they are on the ball, and they were good dudes. And they were telling me I think they're up to like 80 something personnel now for the department.
Oh yeah, probably.
That's really that's amazing.
Well, when I was there, I mean, we got up to like 120, and then we lost a bunch through attrition, and then when you had the real bad economic downturn in Jersey, they lost a bunch of positions and a lot of positions, and they're just trying to rebuild that now. So they're on their way back up. When I was there, we had 6 firehouses. We had 5 assigned to every house, and I had a driver. So, you can figure that out. That's, 30, we had 32 on a shift, and we had 3 shifts. So that's, 96 plus training, plus admin, plus the fire marshal's office, plus all those numbers. So, we had a good sized staff, and we lost a bunch of that, through economic downturn. So they're on their way building back up. But yeah, they're sharp, man. I mean, they're bringing a lot of good folks on, and they got a lot of great officers on. It's really kind of funny. So the guys up in headquarters right now, the fire chief and the assistant chiefs, they were all in my recruit class that I ran.
Okay.
So I go back and I'll call them up every once in a while, man, and they'll remind me about that, and I used to turn it on them, now they turn it on me. It's okay, pops.
Oh man.
We'll put a walker in the locker for you just next time you visit. It's like, man, I'm okay. But yeah, it's just a great place, man. It really is. I can't say enough about it.
You always see their guys out at different conferences too, not just in Jersey. You go to Pensacola at all. If you go to Andy Frederick's training days, anywhere, those guys are there. Special ops, engine, you name it. They're really, really sharp guys, and they invest in their people. It's a model agency right there.
From day one, we always put an emphasis on a bunch of stuff. I mean, we put an emphasis on physical fitness. We put an emphasis on training, and we put an emphasis on operational readiness and execution. And we talked about that stuff all the time, every day, all day long. And, 30 years down the road, you see it now. I mean, we planted the seeds, and we just kept on watering that seed, and we just kept on nurturing that little plant. And 30 years down the road, now you got a pretty strong tree. And what you just talked about, seeing these guys out there in all these different events and whatever, it just ties back to the beginning. And it's not that those of us in the beginning were so good. It's just that's how you build, a legacy in an organization. You define those things that are so important, and you just invest in it. And, before you know it, it just draws those type of people that want to be part of something like that. And for me, a physically fit, trained, competent, operationally proficient firefighter, I mean, I mean, do we want anything other than that on our fire engines? I mean, I just don't see it any other way. Mm-hmm. So that's what we talked about. And, and it does my heart good to hear guys like you say that, because it tells me that mindset that we worked so hard on 30 years ago is still alive and well today.
Absolutely. The guys I know there, they're excellent guys. Whether it was, Bobby McDermott just retired, but you want to talk about a guy that sets the bar pretty high. And then you got Jimmy Keegan and Ferguson. There's the Houck brothers. What great forward-thinking guys that always want to do better and leave it better than they had it when they got there. I mean, it's a testament to your organization, how you guys set it up.
And all those names ring a bell, man. Bob McDermott worked for me when he was a fireman, and I was a battalion chief. Jason and Zach Houck. I mean, I've worked with both of those guys for years. So I mean, all those names ring a bell, and I think they're just continuing the path forward, man. It's as much when you look at it now. When I think about when you look at it now and where they are going to be like 30 years from now? Where now they got 60 years of that history and just constantly just drilling down on those core values that we mentioned. It's like, man, it's phenomenal.
If those values have made it, 30 years now, they are 100% going to make it 60 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the message is, it just goes, because look, and I say this all the time, the only reason why I made chief is because the smart guys didn't show up on test day. They looked around the room and they say, I give it to the tall guy with the mustache, and let's just hope he doesn't break anything. That's how I made chief. What you're looking at in Cherry Hill, what we're talking about now, it just goes to show that if you're willing to do the work and invest in the people, you can make it happen, man. You don't have to have the goose that lays the golden egg. You don't have to have all this other type of stuff. I mean, we didn't have good facilities. We didn't have good apparatus. I mean, we had some political issues going on. We had some politicians coming after us because they wanted to fold us into their branch of government so they could get our tax base. I mean, we had this thing, that thing. And we just said, no, man, we're going to stand here. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to work real hard. And hard work always works. So I think this, the moral of the Cherry Hill story is if you have a heart and you have desire and you're willing to do the work, you can make it happen. You can come in with a million excuses, or you can roll up your sleeves and you can go get the work done. And I tell people, it's your choice, man. There's an old saying, man, you can have excuses or results, but you can't have both. Pick one. Which one do you want?
Chief, I like how you mentioned physically fit. Even 30 years ago, that was something that you wanted, you had a drive for, is having physically fit guys. And in today's fire service, I know it's you got some guys that are all about physical fitness and being prepared for the job, and then you got some that aren't. So I really liked how you mentioned that. Even 30 years ago, we were striving to be physically fit and be good firemen, able to do the job.
So when we started the academy, I mean, I told the chief, because we had a bunch of conversations about doing an academy. Are we going to do one? Can we do one? We're small. We're, all these other type of things. And I was a battalion chief at the time. I said, listen, I'll tell you what, at the rate that we're going to have to grow, where we are now, what we have on the table, and how we're going to have to grow, if we don't do an academy, if we don't do one, we're just going to throw bodies into a firehouse. And there's no telling what's going to happen. The only way we can really set the tone for the future is to run our own academy, regardless, and we hired all certified personnel, but, we want to bring them in to our place, and we want to spend a couple weeks with them really drilling down on what it means to be a Cherry Hill fireman. And they looked at me and said, that's a great idea. So you're going to do it? And I'm looking around like, I go, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it if you let me do it my way. Because, I'd been in the Army for years. And I mean, I had a good feel. I mean, I'm not just a drill sergeant that yells at guys. I mean, I understand, I understand how to move people to that end state where we want to get them. I said, well, if you want, I'll do it but you got to let me do it my way. And they said, okay. So we did PT every morning, man. We ran every morning. I mean, we did pull-ups every morning. We did all that stuff, man. And I did PT with him every day. And it was just because I'm looking at the Chiefs. I go, if we don't harp on fitness from day one, we're not going to be able to fix it 5 years down the road when we realize we got a segment of the organization that's really lacking in this particular component. I mean, we got a chance to fix it right now. And some of the folks that were part of that initial merge. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, some of them were into it, some of them weren't. We just had to kind of live with that. They eventually phased out because they retired, they moved on. But everybody we replaced them with, and every position that we expanded the department by, they came through the academy. And you know what? The academy is the academy, guys, girls. We ain't lying. I'm not hiding anything from you. I mean, it was in all the literature that we sent them. It was in the interviews when we talked to them. Oh, excuse me.
Earthquake.
No. A little wind from down east. But we told them that's what it was going to be, and they came through the door, and it's this is our expectation, and we just stayed with it, and they've done some pretty neat stuff too over the course of time. I mean, they were doing stuff where we had one of the trainers for the Philadelphia Flyers who lived in town, and he got involved with them for a while, and they were helping. He was doing some stuff. And then they had some incentive programs. They're always doing something. I mean, they got guys. We were running a lot. When I was younger, I used to run a real lot. So we had a whole bunch of us. We used to go to races, man. We had the running squad. We had our own little logo. We made shirts. They do the Climb for Air every year over in Philadelphia. I say there's all types of things going on, man. They run over to Ben Franklin Bridge, like the last day in the academy. They carpool over to the Ben Franklin Bridge and they run over the bridge to Philadelphia and they come back. I mean, we do all types of things, man. There's always pull-up bars out behind the firehouse. So it's just part of who we are, and we don't take it for granted, and that's the way it is. And if you're going to be part of this team, this is being part of the team. So just go ahead and do it, And when the bosses are out there doing it with you, it's like, okay, you want to bitch about it? Well, the bosses are out here. I mean, I'll tell you what, you want to complain about this whole thing? Everybody stop. Go on over there and talk to the chief. Tell the chief, okay, now you're here for like 2 weeks. Go tell the chief why we shouldn't be doing this. And I'll just fold my hands and I'll just watch this show. Because I hope you got a big bag and put all your stuff in, because you're not going to be here for more than 20 minutes. And we never really had to say that, because that's just the way it was. And we were fortunate. That's how we started. And it's just stayed. So
yeah, strong culture.
Yeah.
I'm sure a majority of the people that were applying for the position already knew that.
Oh.
They could tell just by a little bit of research. They can tell, and I'm sure you didn't have many that were giving issues for that aspect.
I think I ran the first 4 recruit classes. We did class 1 through 4, and in the 4 classes, I had 2 that they just said, "Nah, this isn't for me." It's like, all right, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean that you're not a good firefighter. It just means that we just happen not to be a good fit for you. But we've decided on what we want to be, and we're not going to change that just because you showed up. It's like, this is who we are. You can, get with our program and stay here and have a great career in a great organization and do some great things, or decide this isn't for you and you can, go somewhere else. And it's no harm, no foul. Not, there's not good, bad, whatever. It's just, it's not a good fit, because all the people and this is one of the things about this whole recruit, academy thing that, I'm so passionate about. When you go out to the firehouse, all the people you're going to work with have been through the exact same thing that you have. Okay? They know the drills. They know what the ant farm is like. They know what the 24-hour thing is like. They know what all those evolutions are, all those drills, all those experiences are, because they've been through it too. And if that doesn't resonate with you, then you're probably just not a good fit for us. So, like I said, two people in the 4 classes I ran, 2 people said, "No, this isn't for me." It's like, all right, no problem. Just turn all your stuff in. Make sure we got the right address. We're going to mail you your last paycheck. And hey, I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. It's not like I don't care. It's just I had to care about what was going to graduate from the academy. And if I say, well, that's not too important, don't worry about it. Well, when they go out to the firehouse, everybody in firehouse has the expectation that this new class has vetted through the process that they did. It's just I couldn't turn my back on that, because the people in the firehouses, the officers, the firefighters, the battalion chiefs, they were trusting me to make sure that we ran the program that we said we were going to run. So, and that's what we did.
That's incredible.
You set those standards, and you didn't detour away from those. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, as if you weren't busy enough in that time frame, I think I also heard that you were one of the founding members of New Jersey Task Force 1 too.
Yeah. Yep.
How'd you get into that?
Well, I've always been like a rescue guy. I've always been interested in rescue. So when the state started, Task Force 1, we knew about it. And we just, we went to the chief and said, hey, man, we want to try to get in on this, man. We want to get in on the ground floor. And, at the time, we had Roger Altschafer. So, he had a good feel for that. He goes, yeah, absolutely. Why would we want to let that opportunity pass us by? So he said, yeah, go up, fill out the applications, man. We'll sponsor you. So there's four of us got into it. And yeah, now that you mention it, with everything I had going on, plus I was doing that, it's like, man,
So it's quite the commitment at that time.
Yeah,
when my wife would give the kids, my picture, you say, hey, if you see this guy walking down the hallway, it's not a stranger, okay? He belongs here. Don't lock yourself in the room and call 911. He actually belongs here. But
he's okay. We like him.
Man, she held the house together, man. She did so much to keep the family, centered right where we needed to be. That allowed me to do all this, all that I was doing. Because I did, like I said, when the recruit schools were in, man, I was working my shift and then I was staying over on those days. Task Force 1. I was in the Army Reserve, so I got activated. I went away to the first Gulf War. I was gone for like 4 or 5 months. Then
wow.
I was, gone for, USAR deployment. So, yeah, she really held, man, having a good wife and having that solid partner, makes all the difference in the world. But
there's a good man, there's a better woman behind him.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm the living proof to that, man. Absolutely. But it was good.
Chief,
it was just opportunities.
Chief, over your career, who would you say some of your best mentors were, or the people who shaped you into the fireman and the fire officer you were and are today?
Yeah, well, I think I give a lot of credit to Roger Altschafer. I've mentioned him several times. Bob Giorgio ended up Bob Giorgio. When I went to Cherry Hill, I was a captain. Bob Giorgio was a firefighter. He took the captain's test. He ended up passing me on the promotions, and he ended up becoming our fire chief after Roger retired. And Bob did so much to help me. So I always mention Bob Giorgio. And then the list is a mile long, man. I just got to thank all those guys that worked with me, worked for me, worked hand in glove, man. The list is so long. I'd love to spit out names, but every time I do, I leave like 3 guys off, and I feel so bad about that. But I'd say, the Cherry Hill Fire Department, man. The Cherry Hill Fire Department made it happen. And then I went to Sunrise Beach, Missouri, and that was another organization. I was brought in because the board of directors felt like they needed to make some changes, and they needed to move in another direction. And, man, I had some guys out there that would do anything for me. I still talk to some of them. Kenny Weberg. Kenny Weberg came on in our first recruit academy class in Sunrise Beach as a fireman. And he had owned a business. He was kind of a strong-willed guy, man. Me and him butted heads a couple times, and boy, I tell you what, man, I don't, just like one day we both woke up and we said, man, we got to start working together, and we did. And he's the deputy chief out there now. He's doing some great work. I had David Hurtubise, Jack Haggard, Kenny's stepson Austin Marlin. He's a captain out there now. Bunch of officers out there, bunch of firefighters out there that really did some good work. And I said I wasn't going to run off a list of names and leave some Cherry Hill guys out, and I just ran off a bunch of names, and I know I left some of the Missouri guys out, and I hate that. But between those 2 organizations, that's what really kind of shaped me into the chief officer that I was. So, yeah.
Yep. Those organizations did it. It wasn't just one person.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
That's awesome.
I mean, I had some influence. I mean, I was a chief. I had some influence, man. But what I always tried to do is I always tried to make sure that we were bringing the right people on. We would look at people real hard. We would talk to them. We would ask questions. We do some backgrounds, and then we put them into that recruit school, which is a vetting process to really see how they act and how they respond. And based on everything, we would really identify the people that we thought were a good fit. And most time, every once in a while, we made a mistake. Every once in a while, we had to call somebody in and say, hey, listen, this really isn't working out. But the vast majority of them vetted out to be what we thought they were going to be, and they worked out, man. But we spent a lot of time. We spent a lot of time and a lot of effort in that. I mean, as an example, when we had people come in for an interview, they'd come to headquarters. So one of the guys would go out and go look at their car. Because if you got a dumpster on 4 wheels with a broken windshield, your registration's expired by 1.5 years, and your safety inspection's expired, where do you think you're going to be? Is this person now all of a sudden, going to become this stellar rock star pillar of the community? So, and we started looking at all those type of things. And when we first started doing it, guys looked at me like, what are you, crazy? I go, no, think about that. Just think about that. And they go, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, we would do that. In Missouri, we give them a PT test like day one, first thing in the morning. We give them a PT test. Well, they've got their warning letter already. You're going to be hired, and these are our standards. First thing, we give them a PT test, and someone would fail the PT test. It's like, that's the way to set a good first impression, isn't it? So, and most times when they fail the PT test on day one, they don't make it to the end of probation. They just don't, because that's an indicator. That's a window into, okay, so the PT test, you got to run 1.5 miles in 13 minutes. You got to do 25 push-ups. You got to do 2 pull-ups, and you got to do 40 sit-ups. It's like, I'm not telling you to run the Ironman triathlon. These are very easily obtainable standards if you've been, doing PT. But, we want people, and it goes back to, like you said, we put a high emphasis on PT. We want people on our fire apparatus who are operationally fit, which means they can get on the fire ground and they can do some extremely difficult tasks in very challenging situations. And when you hang, you've got this notice. You had this notice for 4 weeks, and on day one you hang on the pull-up bar, and you can't even bring your elbows to 90. You can't even do 90 degrees, and you're just hanging on the pull-up bar with your feet spinning like you're riding a bicycle. It's like, okay, we'll see where we are 6 weeks from now. And the folks that were like that, they ended up ringing the bell, and it's like, okay, well. And they can probably go down the road and be successful in some other fire department. But what we were doing in Missouri, and I'm talking about what we were doing in Sunrise Beach, Missouri, we had a plan, we had a vision, we were moving in a certain direction, and we felt you had to be able to do these things to help us move in that direction. And man, if you're not, you're not. Thanks for coming out, but I don't know what to tell you. They'd hang on the bar and their feet would just, they're like, bro, you're not riding a bicycle, man. Your feet can move 100 miles an hour. It's not going to put your chin over the bar. It's like all right here, bro. It's this, Feet are just.
They're going up the imaginary stairs.
Yeah, exactly. 2 pull-ups. I mean, for crying out loud, 2 pull-ups. I mean, I was in my 50s when I was the chief out there. I could do two pull-ups. I mean, I couldn't do more than that, many more than that. I mean, I got a bum shoulder and some other nagging injuries, but shit, I could at least do 2 pull-ups. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
You're 21 years old? Okay. We'll see. Because it's not, and we were telling them, hey, listen, this is day one. It's not going to get any easier. This is 6 weeks. It's going to get harder every day. And you're struggling now. It's like, if you got the willpower and the determination, you'll make it. But, if you're quitting on this, 6 weeks is going to be a long, long time.
Yeah. And if you're quitting here, I don't want to see it. So if you're quitting here, I don't want to see what's going to happen in a fire.
Well, that's why we do PT with them. That's when, when you're laying on your back at like 7:15 in the morning and it's 40 degrees out and you're doing flutter kicks, it's not about doing the flutter kick. I mean, it's really not about that. It's about the mindset and that drive and that determination, how much you're willing to overcome to get to the goal. And that's why we did it. I mean, we ran 4 or 5 days a week, and it's not, certainly the fitness aspect was a big part of it. But can you drive yourself 5 days a week for 6 weeks to come out every morning and do PT every morning and run every morning and do all this other type of stuff? Because if you can't, then, what are you going to do? When we're making that push, because there's a kid in that back bedroom and it's a gnarly hallway, man, if you're rolling over and quitting on some flutter kicks in the parking lot, man, what are you going to do in the hallway? And we would tell people that.
Absolutely.
We would tell people, this is why we're doing PT. We're watching to see how you handle this situation, because it's an indicator on how you're going to handle the other things. And if you're struggling here, you're going to be struggling there. And we saw people who would struggle, and we would take them to the side, we would talk to them, and we'd lay everything out for them. And, some people, they got it, and over the course of 6, 7, some of our academies, I think one academy we were actually able to push out to 8 weeks, which was a big deal. We had 8 full weeks with them. Well, over the course of 8 weeks, if they've got the right mindset, you can see things starting to click. And we'd always give them a chance. We'd pick up on it right away, and we'd pull them off to the side and say, hey, man, what's going on? See you struggling. And then we'd explain what the whole idea was. And, then you would see him say, okay, man, I got it, man. I'm going to work a little bit harder tomorrow. And they'd come in, they'd still struggle, but you could see it was, they weren't letting their mind get the best of them. They're still struggling with the event, but they're pushing through it, so. And then as soon as you see that, man, you grab them, you pull them over to the side, man, you put your arm around them and say, hey, man, good job. And you walk away. You give them that little win, and when you give them that little win and you recognize that win, they're going to come back because they're going to want another win. Yeah. And then positive energy just begets positive energy.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think mindset can give anybody the strength.
Yeah.
It's all in your mind, no matter how strong you are. Like, I was thinking about those two pull-ups. Like, even the most out of shape, unfit person, if they have the right mindset, they could do those 2 pull-ups.
Yeah. And we'd allow them to jump up on the bar, man. So you only really have them to do one.
Just get one.
Yeah.
Because at first, you use that momentum. Now, at the end of the academy, they were doing 5 pull-ups because that's something else that we did. We had pull-up bars right there at the door to the classroom, so we did ins and outs every week. Like every time you went in, you had to jump on the bar and do like 2 or 3 pull-ups, and every time you went out, you had to do like 10 push-ups. And then the next week we'd have them do like 2 commando pull-ups, and and going out they'd have to do like 10 Chinese pull-ups or some push-ups. I mean, we really varied it out. But at the end of 6 weeks, man, they were, if they were willing to stay with the program and they were willing to do the work, at the end of 6 weeks, man, they were in good shape. And they were ready. They were ready to get out. They were ready to get out to the firehouses and get after it.
Yeah. In my academy, the PT, so there wasn't like a base number that everybody had to hit. It was just that you had to show improvement throughout the academy. It was 13 weeks.
Yeah.
And almost everybody in the academy showed improvement. As long as you have your mindset in the right place and you stick with it, you're going to show improvement.
Yeah, we just wanted to have a number. We wanted to be able to put our finger on a number and say, this is what you had to do. But I see a lot of merit in the other ways too. And I say this all the time on my social media sites, man. Mine isn't the only way, and I'm not even going to say it's the best way. It's a way that I've found works. But there's 5 or 6 other ways out there that probably work just as well as mine does. The only reason why I throw a lot of stuff out there on my social media site is to give people a way, and they can look at it and say, okay, that makes sense. And, and I get in these big. I don't allow myself get in big arguments with social media, but anytime I put something up there, man, anytime I put something up there, man, I always get 2 or 3 people that really just blast me. It's like, all right, whatever, dude. I just read the comments and I chuckle. And if they keep on coming back, if they keep on poking, trying to get a response, I just delete the comment and block them. Go argue with someone
somewhere else. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't have time for that.
I ignore almost all of them. I don't even engage. I don't know. There's no space in my head to even engage in that.
Yeah. And, where I really learned that lesson is I put something up about portable radios and radio straps, and I put a link to the Fairfax study. To talk about keep your radio underneath your coat, expose the antennas, because the coat blocks some of the RF. And I put all that on there, but I had a link right to the study. So this guy gets on there and he just rips me left, right, up, down, whatever. Like I'm an absolute moron. It's like, all right, whatever. So I answered a couple of his points. His points didn't make any sense. So and I ended with, make sure you read the study that I've linked in the post so you can understand my perspective. So like the next day I go look and he's got even more comments up there. It's obvious he didn't read the post. It's obvious he didn't read the study. So I said, let me just check this guy out. So I click on his his name and whatever, and it takes me back to his Facebook page. And on his Facebook page, the banner says, I'm a very intelligent person, and I don't give a fuck what anybody else thinks. It's like,
there you go.
Okay.
Easy enough.
Delete.
Here's your sign.
Block.
Yeah.
There you go. And I try not to use a lot of profanity when I'm on podcasts, but that's a quote, man. That is an absolute quote. It's like, okay, whatever. Moving on.
I can promise you, it doesn't bother us.
No.
Not
No,
one
I
bit.
mean, as much time as you guys have spent in the firehouse, no, there's no way it does. But anyhow, but yeah.
We try and tone it back just a little bit. Being from New Jersey, it's a little challenging at times.
Yeah. Yeah. Believe me, raising kids, spending all that time in the firehouse and then coming home and being dad, it's like, uh-oh, gotta watch out. Not in the firehouse. I gotta be dad today. Yep.
Chief.
Chief.
Oh, go ahead.
Nah, you got it.
No. Chief, you tell us about your first fire?
Man, let me think about this. It was back in Spring Lake, man, when I was a volunteer. We caught a lot of fire back there because it was right outside of Fort Bragg. And, they all kind of run together at this point. But, there were some pretty nasty duplex fires we went to. So I remember a couple of them. When I went down to Bonnie Doon, we were going to trailer fires all the time. So, I went to a bunch of them. But then, some of the fires that, I really start remembering is when I went, full-time in the city of Durham. And, once again, we had, like the, kind of tough side of town. And we were going to fires there all the time. A lot of residential fires. We went to an apartment fire one time. And I remember this one. It was a bad lightning storm, and the apartment building caught on fire. And the fire was running in the common in the attic. So I was on rescue, me and the other guy on rescue. So we see what's going on, and we know what's happening. So we get about 2 or 3 apartments down. We force our way in, and we get into this apartment. It was vacant. So we're in there with a line. I'm pretty deep in the apartment. We're going to pull the ceiling, and then we're going to try to cut the fire off. Well, I didn't realize this. The fire had burned through the roof, and they just turned the aerial on. And I was like right underneath of it. So, and everything went dark, man. I mean, it was one of those somethings with the twin horns, and they turned both of them on, man. I'm looking up, and then, the next thing I know, I'm out on the curb. It's like, what happened?
Washing out of the building?
Yeah.
Man, it must have knocked me out. It just blasted me because it burned through. Because we had worked our way down and it burned through. We kind of looked at it. We knew about where we wanted to get. And, man, they just fired that thing up, man. It was like, I remember that. I remember that fire.
Yeah.
That was pretty nasty. But then, I promoted up, man. I've been a chief for like 30 years. So, a lot of the fires that I can really remember, I remember, as being an incident commander. So we had a bunch of nasty apartment fires in Cherry Hill. I remember one fire we had in Cherry Hill, and Bob Giorgio was the chief. And we got there, and we transmitted the all hands right away. We knew it was a working fire, and he lived in town. So he got there right about the time I got there. So I kind of looked at it. I said, I'll tell you what, if you give me 10 minutes and 2 companies, we'll put this thing out. Because it was well involved on the one end of the building, but I, flashed back to some of these other apartment fires where it gets in the attic and starts running. And so he says, all right, I'll give you 24s and 52. So we got around the back, threw a ladder up, got up onto the second floor of another vacant apartment, pulled some ceiling, we cut the fire off right there. And it was I just remember that fire. And because we had always gone to these fires and we kind of chased them. And this one fire, I was in the right position. The chief was in the right position. We just had all these things line up. And I just told him, I said, if you give me 10 minutes, that's all I need. And if it doesn't work, I'll come out and we'll do whatever. And he goes, you got 10 minutes. and he gave me the 2 companies, and we got around to the back, and we made a stop on it.
That's a good boss right there. Give me 10 minutes and let you go.
Yeah, give me 10 minutes. But he and I had known each other for a long time, and he knew he could trust me, and I knew that I could trust him. And he knew when I said, give me 10 minutes, we just had that relationship. I said, give me 10 minutes. And if he called me and said 10 minutes is up, it's all right. We would have come out. I had a battalion chief work for me one time when I was a chief. And I told him to come out because I'm standing in the front yard in that area and I'm watching the fires actually starting to get behind them and they don't realize it. And I'm starting to get scared. It's like, this is not going to be good. The fire is going to cut them off. So I called this battalion chief. I said, man, back the line out. And he started arguing with me. He says, we got it. Just give me a minute. I said, no, back the line out now. And he goes, we'll be out in just a minute. We got this. And I told him on the radio, I said, if you don't come out in 5 seconds, I'm going to pull the line out. And he said, oh, all right. And I went the next day and I talked to him about that. I said, listen, if I give an order on fire ground, there's no give me, if I'm giving you an order on fire ground, it's because I see something that you don't. And you just got to trust me as being the guy who's ultimately responsible for everything that happens. And if I tell you to come out, come out. And that's what I expect, that's what I expect of my chiefs who are, my tactical supervisors, because that's what I learned from Cherry Hill. And that's the way we were, man. Give me 10 minutes. Okay, you got 10 minutes, but at 10 minutes in a second, if you're not getting it, you're coming out. It's like, okay. Mm-hmm. So, but those are some, fire ground stories that may resonate.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. We're still doing that today.
Yeah. And then, we had another fire. We had a fire in Osage Beach. We had a 3-story condo that, ended up going. And we had 4 kids on the 3rd floor. We had to do VES with a 35-foot extension ladder into the 3rd floor to find those kids. And they all perished. I think they all died from smoke inhalation. But, my message is, that fire is coming, So when I talk about, the need to prepare, the need to be physically fit, the need to train every day, the need to drive around, be familiar with your first due local, your second due local. How do I get up there? What are the walkouts like? What size ladder do I need to go to what window, man? Because when that fire comes, you don't have 20 minutes to game plan. When that fire comes, it's seconds, and man, you got to be ready to go. And that fire really took. I think that fire took a lot of people back because we went to a lot of fires, but we didn't go to a 3-story apartment building that had 4 kids trapped on the 3rd floor. We just did not do that all that often until the day that we had to do it. And it happens. It happens in anybody's community, man. So that's one of the things that I still talk about now in some of my presentations and some of the classes I do, man. Just that absolute need for you to be, dialed in, man. Drive around, go find the building. And I say this to new officers. Go find the building that scares you the most. Because everybody's got a building in their first due that if it catches on fire, you want to be on vacation that day. We all do. They're in every local, man. So you go find that building and then start asking yourself, well, what scares me about this building? Is it the way out? Is it construction? Is it the contents? Is it the size of the building? And I'm not sure, how we're going to get the lines in there. Is it forcible entry issues? Is it grade issues? What are those things that are scaring you about that building? Because they're not going to go away. I mean, if it troubles you, if it scares you for a reason, and those problems aren't going to go away. So what can you do at the kitchen table to kind of hammer that out? Say, hey, man, if this building comes in, if we get a run here and it's in the AB corner or it's in the, the CD corner, whatever, this is our play, man. This is the door that we're going to look to go through. This is how long the stretch is. we're going to have to go 2.5. We're going to have to do a leader line, whatever. I mean, whatever. But just start hammering those things out, because that building that scares you is going to catch on fire one day. You may be off. It may happen after you retire, or it may be your next day at work, because everybody who was on that fire that I'm talking about at the Compass Point condos, we drove by those buildings all the time. I mean, it's not a secret. They were 3-story condos, and there was no access on the seaside because they were butted right up to the lake, and there was a drop off. So you really couldn't access the seaside. And it was a wooden staircase that was unprotected because they were built prior to code. So you've got, the typical, it's 2, 2, and 2 with the center staircase. Well, the fire started up on the 3rd floor balcony, and it was wind driven onto the staircase. So by the time we get there, the staircase is well involved in fire. Well, if you can't access the back of the building and the staircase is well involved, and you got to go to the 3rd floor, how are you going to get there? I mean, you're not going to grow a set of wings and fly up there. So these are all things that we had to figure out on the fly. And, and I was a mutual aid chief. I was coming from the other side of the lake, so that wasn't my first due. But, we used to drive around our first due all the time and ask those questions, man. What are we going to do? What are we going to do if we get a run here? How are we going to overcome the distance? How are we going to overcome the setbacks? What are we going to do about water supply? Hey, we don't have hydrants in this part of the district, so what can we figure is our fire ground flow per tanker that's in the rotation? And, if you don't have hydrants, you got to figure that out. So we did some testing, and we came to the point where every 300 gallons of fire ground flow, we needed to have a tanker. So if we needed to flow 1,200 gallons a minute, we needed 4 tankers in the rotation. Because by the time they go, they fill up, they come back, they dump, they go, fill, and come back, that's time. So, and most of the tankers down there were anywhere from 18 to 2,000 gallons. So, they dump 1,800 gallons of water, but then they have to go back and, fill and come back. So we played around with all of this stuff because we used to talk about this type of stuff in the firehouse. What are we going to do? Because figuring it out when we get there doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I mean, if that's if that's your plan of attack, just plan on failing. And I've never woke up. There's not a single day I've ever woke up to say, "Hey, man, I'm okay with failing and being 3rd best, man. I want to win every fight, and I want to be number 1." Now, I don't win every fight, and I'm certainly not number 1, but that's the way I approach things. And I think that when you approach it with that mindset, you end up winning more than you lose. So, it's my fireground stories.
All right, that's a great mindset and approach.
That's great.
Yeah.
So we talked about some of your lessons that you game planned out ahead of time. What's a fire service lesson you learned the hard way?
Quite honestly, I think what I learned the hard way, well, a couple of things. Number one is I learned that if you don't game plan things out and you try to figure it out there, it's not going to work well for you. And that's why I'm, such an advocate of that. And the other thing that I learned is you got to be humble, man, because no matter how hard you work, there's going to be a bad day. You got to be able to roll with the punches. You got to be able to say, okay, what did we do well, and what do we need to fix so that we don't do this, we don't make the same mistake again. And if you're asking especially from a chief officer standpoint, man, you got to be really fluid on the fire ground. You got to understand that you're going to look at something, you're going to size something up, decide a strategy, implement that through your tactical supervisors who are going to handle the tactical and the task level, and the things that they do aren't going to work. So now you got to be able to, shift gears in a second on the fire ground. And I say this, when I teach chief officers and I teach incident command. Gretzky said that he always skated to where he thought the puck was going to be. He would never skate to where the puck was. He'd skate to where he thought it was going to be. And that's a lesson that I really impart to guys, especially people who are going to eventually be in that IC role, man. When you're running a fire, man, you got to be 10 minutes out ahead. You've got to identify what you want to try to do. Put people in play who can execute what you want done, and have a clear vision on what success on this end is going to look like. And I'm looking, I'm watching, and I know exactly what I expect. If the people who are executing the tactics and the task are successful, I expect to see white steam coming out of the eaves at this point. And I'm looking for it. And if I don't see it, then what's my next plan? And I've already got that. I'm already working that plan B. And I learned this from burning buildings down, from doing a lousy job as an incident commander because I didn't have a lot of experience. And I really kind of fumbled my way through it. Roger Alshaver told me the day that I walked in the firehouse, my first day as a battalion chief, he called me in the office and he sat down next to me. He says, Dennis, you did really well on the assessment center. Congratulations. But the most important test you take is the test you take every day you come to work, because that's the test that really matters. When you come to work and you're making decisions and running fires and dealing with personnel, man, you got to be right. And if you're not, you gotta figure out what's wrong, and you got to figure out what the fix is real quick. So, the lessons that I learned on the fire ground was, skate to where you think the puck's going to be. Because when I first made chief, I'm coming off a busy company, man. I'm that tactical guy. But now I got to work at that strategic level, and man, I stumbled a couple times, man. There were a couple of fires that probably could have gone a lot better had I been skating to where the puck was going to be. So, does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I think that was an incredible answer to that.
Yeah.
It kind of details. Right now, none of us are officers in our career departments, but you can see when you have an aggressive fireman or aggressive line officer, or the lieutenant or captain, and they make the jump, that they still operate in that rig officer mindset.
Oh yeah,
and it's definitely a challenge, and then it takes them a little bit to get into it, but then they're off to the races. It's a great way to summarize that.
Yeah, and I think what we do in the fire service is we do a lousy job. Fire service we do a lousy job preparing people for these promotions. We do a lousy job preparing people to go from firefighter to company officer, and I think we do a lousy job preparing people to go from company officer to chief officer, because we don't have these conversations with them. We don't tell them about this. They take a test, and it's like, all right, congratulations. I say this in one of my officer development programs. When you promote, be prepared for this day, and it's gonna be like somebody kicked you in the teeth. You're gonna walk in the room and everybody's gonna stop talking. So, what's going on? Well, you were a fireman for 12 years, but now you're an officer, and you're going to walk in the room and everybody's going to stop talking. And the problem is, when that happens, some men, some women will say, well, I've got to kind of be more like one of the fellas because I got to get along. Well, no, you're the boss. You're the officer. Expect them to stop talking when you walk into the room. And quite honestly, you don't want to know, and this is a lesson for chiefs, you don't want to know everything that they're saying. You don't. That's just kind of the way it is. They've got to have their space. They've got to have their comfort. They've got to have their ability to say what's on their mind. And your presence may stop that from happening. Okay? So don't be surprised when they stop talking when you walk in the room, And I had that happen a lot. So I talk about the football game, or I talk, because I knew the guys, I knew the guys, I knew their sons were playing travel ball, so I talk about travel ball or something like that to kind of break the ice, and then we could have our conversations business wise, and then I knew when to leave. You got to know when to get up and leave from the table too, because your presence at the table, and I say especially the Chiefs, your presence at the table condones everything that's being said at that table. And if you're a little bit uncomfortable, you're there. The conversation's going on. And now I'm not saying that you shouldn't intercede when things really cross the line. Absolutely, you're the chief. But there are times where, as a chief, you just got to know when to get up and say, "Hey, man, I got to go to the office. Hey, man, thanks. I'm making rounds. I just stopped in. I forget who told me this recently. I heard somebody say this, that a good measure for a chief is 1 cup of coffee. Come to the firehouse, drink a cup of coffee, answer any questions. When the coffee's done, leave the firehouse. Don't be there. Don't overstay your welcome, because it's their space and you've got to kind of respect that. So, but I don't think that we taught the up and coming officers and up and coming chiefs enough about these things. We just kind of promote them, and they got to figure it out on their own. And in the process of figuring this out on their own, they make some mistakes that can really lead to some problems. I say this all the time, man. If fire departments, if they announce promotions are coming up, and we're going to do the test in 90 days. If they would have me come in and just let me talk to all the candidates, just me and the candidates, give me like 90 minutes. When I left, I guarantee you a couple guys would pull out the process, because I would tell them what it's going to be like. I would tell them that you're going to walk in the room one day and you're going to stop talking. You're going to walk in the room one day and have to pull somebody out that you've known for 12 years and have a real tough conversation with them because of their behaviors. You're going to have to do that. And if you don't do that, every department I was ever the chief in, I always read the discipline code, because most times I found discipline codes to be severely lacking. But there was a charge of failure to supervise. So if you were an officer, I could charge, if you didn't do your job, I could charge you with failure to supervise. And like the first offense was, like a 48-hour suspension without pay. Like the third one was demotion, Yeah.
Wow.
But you're the officer. You're the one in charge, and just understand, and when you start, and people, look, a lot of folks come into the promotional process very idealistic, and some of them come into the process just because they want a raise. Well, man, you got to lay this out on the table for them, because this is all part of being an officer. And I mean, I don't take any joy in having to do this, and I've had to do this before, and it's a terrible experience. It was a terrible experience for me, and I'm not the guy who's getting hammered. I can only, I have empathy for a human being who's sitting on the other side of the desk. But that's all part of being an officer. So if you're going to be that person, you need to know what's entailed with the position that you're pursuing. And I guarantee you, if I talk to a big pool of candidates, 1 or 2 of them would say, "Man, I'll just go to trade school at night, man. I'll get my plumber's license and I'll make money like that," because they just don't want to do. And not to say that they're not good employees and good firefighters. One of the best employees and one of the best firefighters I ever had work for me, he stayed a firefighter for 25 years. He was an electrician. He was making his money he wanted to be a fireman. He was very good at what he did. He wanted the benefits. He wanted the pension. And being an electrician is where he really made his money. He just loved being a fireman. But he never wanted to be a boss because of all these other things. And he told me outright, because I asked him one time, I said, "Hey, man, you ever going to promote?" He goes, "Man, I don't want anything to do with it, man. I see what officers have to go through. I'm happy where I am. I feel like I'm in a good place, man. This is where I want to be. So I think that I think that it's incumbent on senior leadership to have these type of conversations with people who are coming up so they know exactly what they're getting into. And then once they know, if they say, hey, I really want to do this, okay, now how do we get you ready for that? How do we prepare you to function at a high level at that job?
Yeah, I think that needs to get dosed around the fire service quite a bit. That whole everything you just said should be spread wide and far because it's lacking.
I travel, man.
In different areas.
I travel. I'll say it. I'm retired, man. Nobody's going to be able to hurt me, man. I mean, I'll come in. I'll say I'll just say the truth, but I think it's the truth. And I put something on my Facebook page, months ago, that said, if we want to solve the problem with fire chiefs in the fire service, and look, I can say this because I was a chief. There's a lot of chiefs out there. They're doing a great job, and there's some chiefs out there who are doing a shitty job. If we want to solve that problem, man, we got to start promoting good company officers. Because where did chiefs come from? They come from the company officer rank. So if we want to enhance the pool of chief officers, we got to make sure we're promoting good company officers. Because somebody can be a really good test taker and get promoted. Is that going to happen just one time? If they're a really good test taker and they're lucky enough to get promoted once, who says you're not going to do really well on the next test and the test after that? And every test that they take, they get a raise and they get more benefits and they get more prestige and whatever. And you guys, you know what I'm saying. Some people gravitate to those positions that have no business in those positions. So, I think
that happens frequently.
Yeah, and I think it's incumbent. I think it's incumbent on people like me, who have been around for a long time, who have seen the good side and the bad side, to be very vocal about this whole issue. And that's why every time I get on a podcast, man. And I've been on a bunch of podcasts. Every time I'm on a podcast, I mention this. I bring it up because I think it's very, very important. We got to make sure that we put the right people in the right seats. I mean, Nick Saban said it all the time. His job was to get the right people in the right seats and get the wrong people off of the bus. That's how he ran Alabama football. And you can say whatever you want about Alabama. If you like him, you hate him, whatever. You think Nick Saban's an asshole, or you think he walks on water. Look at his record. Look at his record. How do you argue with that? And if we take that type of results, isn't that what we want to see on the fire ground? Well, if that's the type of results we want to bring to the fire ground, maybe we need to start thinking about getting the right people in the right seats. And that means really talking to the pool of candidates for the officer positions to make sure they know what they're getting into. And then doing the same thing on the recruit side, running a process and running a recruit school and a probationary process that's going to really identify who is the good fit here. Because, if we look at it in blocks, you got like the firefighters, you got the lieutenants, you got the captains, you got the battalion chiefs. If we start getting these blocks down here right, these blocks over here are going to be right. But we got to get these ones right. So I think we need to have these conversations and lay out expectations. I mean, that's another thing I talk about all the time. In our officer schools, when we promoted people, they had to go to an officer school. We ran our own officer school. So one of the things that I told them to do, one of the assignments they had, is I want you to write an expectations memo for new people that come to your company. And I want you to take a day or two, no more than 2 pages. I want you to write the expectations memo. And on the last day of the officer school, we're going to sit down one-on-one, and I'm going to look at you, and we're going to go over this, and I'm going to give you my feedback on your expectations memo. So now, when I got new officers going out there, when they get a new person in their firehouse, day one, they're setting expectations. So how do you solve some problems? Well, you got to set expectations. But it was a thing that our folks had to do, and quite honestly, people that got into the promotional process, they knew that was going to be something that they had to do. And then, it's a big long chain too. Okay, so you go through our promotional process and you get promoted. So you come to our officer academy, and I make you do this expectations memo, and you and I sit down and we review it. And I say, okay, this is good. So now you got to start issuing that to the people in your company. So 6 months down the road, when I see somebody in your company who is not in compliance with your expectations memo, who do I talk to? Do I talk to them or do I talk to you? I talk to you because you're the boss. And this is another thing that I would say to officer candidates. Whenever I saw anything that I, was wrong, that I didn't agree with, there was a problem on fire ground, problem in the firehouse, I didn't want to talk to a firefighter. I mean, why do I got to talk to a firefighter? I got a supervisor there. Okay? They're the ones who are in charge. Okay? If you don't want to supervise, well, let's bring out the discipline policy that talks about failure to supervise. Because in every promotion ceremony I've ever gone to, and I've gone to hundreds of promotion ceremonies, I've never seen anybody stand there with a gun to their head. Like, you got to get promoted. You chose to promote. Okay? Now, it's a little bit easier for me because I'm so transparent in how I lead and what my expectations are, and everybody knows that they've got, this is the way it is, but it's like, man, this is the way it is. Like, why is that guy running around on the fire ground without his coat on? Why is he doing it? You tell me why. And it's one or two times, and then problems just go away. But it's setting expectations. It's all this stuff. And I know, I ramble on a lot, and I know I've been in like 15 different rabbit holes already. But if you really look at them, they're all connected. They're all interconnected. And what we have to do as bosses is we got to start talking about stuff like this, laying out those expectations and holding people accountable. And that's how we build strength in the service. Because my experience tells me that professionals are okay with that. Professionals really, that's what they're really kind of looking for. You know who doesn't? We talk about complacency and we talk about mutts in the firehouse all the time. You want to deal with complacency and you want to deal with mutts, set expectations and hold people accountable. There you go. You do that. And you tell me what happens. The problems get solved. Now, sometimes you got to shoot a hostage, and I hate that. But the problems get solved. You've got standards, you got accountability. Complacency isn't going to. If I have standards for performance, how can people become complacent? They can't. Yeah. But you got to be willing to have that tough conversation too. So these are all things that, like I said, I know there's a whole bunch of things just kind of banging into each other in this conversation, but I think they're all kind of pieces of the puzzle that officers and chiefs really need to, sit down, and think about real hard. Are we doing this in our organization? Yes or no? If we are, continue the path. And if we're not, let's start looking at the organization. If we're not doing these things, are we really that effective on the fire ground? If we're not doing these things, are we having personnel issues? If we're not doing these things, do we have turnover issues? If we're not doing these things, do we have cultural issues in our firehouses? Because if we're doing all of these things that I'm talking about, most of those problems, they just don't live. they can't survive in those environments. So.
Yeah. And as a firefighter, from a firefighter's perspective, we want those standards. We want to be held accountable.
Sure.
And we want bosses that can discipline somebody and then go out and have a beer with them later.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
Excuse me. It's never about the person. And I tell people this all the time. It's about the performance. It's about the behavior. It's not about Jim or Noah or Rich. I mean, it's about the behavior. This is what you did. Okay, that's not acceptable based on the expectations that have been set for you. So why did you do that? Don't do it again. Just, the whole thing. The whole thing with expectations and standards and all that. And I say this all the time. Is as a boss, it's my job to put you in the position to be successful. Now, what you choose to do with that is up to you. My job is to position you for that. Now, how can you be successful if you don't know what's expected of you? That's back on me to set the expectations. And that's what, officers, in my opinion, need to be doing. And like I said, when I talk to these, this candidate pool, all these people are going to test up for company officer, and I start talking to them about that, there's going to be some of them in the room that they don't have a clue. It's like, man, I don't know where to start. I've got to write expectations. I mean, what are you talking about? Well, you're going to be held accountable for everything those folks do. So if you're going to be held accountable, don't you think that you need to tell them what good behaviors look like? I mean, and seriously, I've had this conversation with officer candidates, and they just look at me like I'm talking a foreign language. It's like, excuse me, bro, you got to figure this out, or you're going to have a long, hard career as a company officer. I mean, your only hope is that all the bosses in your organization are retired on active duty and you can skate through. But if you don't figure this stuff out and you go to work for a guy like me, how long do you think you're going to last before you really get yourself into a tough spot? And sooner or later, who knows? Who knows what that may eventually lead to? I've seen guys demoted. I've seen guys frozen in rank. I saw a guy frozen in rank. They figured out when he was eligible to retire. They went to the calendar and he figured it out. And they told him that if he stayed one day longer past this date, they were going to demote him back to firefighter. It's like, okay. But, at some point in time, I think that, we need to be willing to, make some, and that was a pretty bold, aggressive move. I talk to people about that. You could argue one way or the other, they should have just gotten rid of the guy or whatever. Well, all well and good until you work for municipal government and you try to get rid of somebody who's got like 19 years on. And sometimes the best that a chief can do is just limit the damage that person is going to do. And that's what they did in this case. But that's an awful hard thing when you think about it. So if you're coming up and you're not willing to set expectations and you're not willing to hold people accountable and you don't want to be the person that's got to answer for the actions of your personnel, well, you may very well be that guy who gets frozen in rank into the day you retire. And when that happened, this was not broadcast through the organization, but didn't everybody in that organization know what's going on? Of course they did. Of course they did. So you want to be that person that's got to come into work every day and have that hanging over your head? So this is another thing that I would tell officer candidates. If you're going to pursue a promotion, you need to think about things like this because this is real world. Guys, this ain't some comic book shit that you read, that you read about, or this isn't, something you watch on TV. This is real world things that we have to do as officers and bosses. So if you want to pursue that, it's okay. Just be prepared for it. I mean, I did. I mean, it took me a while, man, and I stumbled and I had some problems, but I made it through. And quite honestly, I had a great career as a firefighter, man. There's many days I wish I was just kind of riding backwards, but the opportunities I've had as a chief, I mean, so many people talk about their organization, man. We need to change. Well, bro, the higher you promote, the more influence that you have. Okay, as a firefighter, you have influence in your firehouse. You can have a lot of influence in your firehouse. And if that's what you're comfortable with, okay, that's cool. Just make it the best firehouse you have. And then people transfer in and out, so maybe you can, kind of spread that in your organization a little bit. But if you promote up, you've got more influence. If you promote up, you're going to officer meetings. Okay, you build a solid reputation for yourself. Now all of a sudden you got one or two other officers who see things the way you do. Now there's three of you speaking in a unified voice in an officers meeting. Okay? And then you promote up again. Now all of a sudden you're a battalion chief, and you're sitting there, you're sitting there in the chief's office every day, talking to the chief one-on-one. You got a solid reputation, maybe the chief listens to you. Maybe you come to the chief and say, hey, look, chief, I'm not really sure that we're going down the right path when it comes to this particular issue. I think we should go this way so that we can create this, and this is what's going to take us, and this is what's going to, take to get us there. And you're having that one-on-one conversation with the chief, you may be able to influence them to change their mind on something. So, in all the doom and gloom shit that I talked about being an officer, and I did, because that's the real world. The other side of it is you having to build your influence tends to be in a wider, larger circle. If you go back to that, the 7 habits of highly effective people that Covey talks about, that as an officer, as a chief, that sphere of influence tends to grow a little bit more. So you can make things happen. Hey man, we got problems. Okay, well, and I tell firemen all the time, man, you sit here on the couch and bitch about it all day long. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? I know a guy, man. He used to bitch. He was one of our drivers, man. He'd bitch about every apparatus the city ever bought, man. They don't know what they're doing. This thing sucks. Well, bro, we're speccing new rigs, man. You want to sit on the apparatus committee? I don't have time for that shit. Okay. Well, you don't have time for that, then don't bitch about what they bought. Mm-hmm. Have some influence is the point that I'm trying to make. So.
That's fantastic, Chief. You're preaching to the choir here, but what? So fantastic.
Well, and we say this all the time, like the people who go to seminars, well, they're not the ones that need to hear this. The guy, well, my experience tells me that you don't want those folks here in the room. Because all they're going to do is they're going to bring their negative energy in. They're going to argue with people. They're going to try to prove that they're the smartest person in the room. You know what? When you get the like-minded people together, just feed off of the energy. And that's a good thing because it stiffens your resolve. It, hardens your spine just a little bit because you're going to have to go back to the firehouse and you're still going to have to work with Joe the landscaper. He's not going away. So, if we can surround ourselves with like-minded people to recharge the batteries, it gives us a little more strength to get through the grind. Because we got to go back and we got to, deal with the grind, and that's just kind of the way it is. But, Chief McGrail from Denver says this all the time, man. the most important rescue you can make in your career is that guy who's sitting on the fence. Because, the mutts are the mutts. I mean, we all know who they are. Okay? And you're never going to change them. But there's a whole bunch of guys out there who are sitting on the fence. And what's going to happen is they're going to move in the direction of the loudest voice. So that when we get these like-minded people together, it just hardens our resolve. Because when you're working with the mutt, you start asking yourself, well, am I the crazy one? Am I the one that doesn't get it, man? But then, we feed off of each other. We get that resolve. We get that ability to go back to the firehouse. And then that one guy, we look past the mutt and we see the woman who's kind of sitting on the fence. And she doesn't know which way to go. And, now we can reach out and we can pull her over into the camp. Say, hey, come on over here. Hey, let me ask you a question, Susie. Of all the things we got to do on the fire ground, and I'm not messing with you, quite honestly, what do you struggle with the most? Oh, you struggle with ladders? Let me go show you a trick. Come on out here. Let's just put our gloves on and let's just go out in the back and let's just, let me show you one or two tricks that I found helps me handling ladders or whatever, forcible entry or whatever. Who knows what the topic is, whatever. But, we feed off of each other, positive energy. We go back to the firehouse and then we can make that move on that person because, we know who the mutts are in the firehouse. And if you worked with these people for a while, you know who the ones, the ones who are riding on the fence. So going up to them and say, hey, listen, man, what task do you struggle with, man? What, is there a task around here? Is there a task that this company does that you struggle with that I might be able to help you? Okay? What are the fence sitters going to say? I mean, they're sitting there waiting for somebody to come up. Those people who are sitting on the fence, they're waiting for one or two things. They're waiting for somebody to come up and say exactly what I just said, or they're waiting for it not to happen. And if it doesn't happen, they go sit here next to the mutt and you're going to join in with them. But when we go out there and say, hey, listen, and I'm being sincere, I'm telling you, I'm being sincere, man. I'm not messing around. I mean, I'm not, this isn't a joke. We're not, I'm here to help you with an issue that you're having a hard time with. Because when we go to a fire, we may have to do that. And you're an important part of it. And I don't want to see you fail. So how about that? So we don't, those people who need to hear this, I get it. We'll deal with them one-on-one back in the firehouse, the ones that we can reach out to. But when we sit down in groups like this, let's just keep the positive people here so we can walk away in a good mindset. Because if we let the other ones, I said, they'll just contaminate everything. I've had them in my classes and seminars. It's like, they want to argue about everything. It's like, all right, whatever, bro. You've been on for like 4 years now. You've been to 2 dumpster fires and a car fire. But you're going to argue with me about strategy and tactics? Okay, that's fine. I get it. No problem there, man. No problem. Okay. Whatever. 2 + 2 = 5. You're absolutely right.
All right.
Next.
Yeah.
Spell cat with a K, right? Yeah, absolutely. You got it, man.
Chief, if there was a class, a seminar, a conference, a training weekend, or anything like that you would want to make mandatory for the entire fire service, which one would you choose?
Well, I'd send them to FDTN, period. I just start sending them up to FDTN. If you're on an engine, I'm going to send you to the engine program. And if you're on a truck, I'm going to send you to the truck program. I'm going to send battalion chiefs to their live fire program. And if you're on a rescue, I'm going to send you to the rescue programs. Now, with that being said, in my opinion, because I'm part of the County Fire Tactics team, I think County Fire Tactics runs some of the best seminars going down here on the best beach in the country, which is Pensacola Beach. So I'd go to FDTN, or I'd go down here to County Fire Tactics. So,
you can't beat those answers.
Yeah, and I basically, endured, like a half a dozen great conferences out there that, are really doing some, fantastic things, man. Great Lakes Hot, Sean Duffy and them guys, man, they're doing some really great work. The Doggone guys, Kevin Pfluger, Tom Hollick, down there in Live Oak, Texas. That's a good program. My buddy Sam with the real high squeaky voice from Hammond, Louisiana, he's putting together a fantastic conference. Small town, job town, man. He's got a bunch of really great people coming in, very reasonable price. So there's so much out there. Once again, the list is long, but quite honestly, I don't think there's a training going on, consistently with as many opportunities as you see at FDTN. So I think that is. Now my buddy Basil from Orlando is doing his one bad tour thing, but he's only doing. The last time I talked to him, I think next year they're going to do 3 of them. I'm going to be at the one in December, and then I think he's going to try to do 3 of them in a year. But that's something too that's on the list. But it's just. I mean, it's there's only like 3 of them, and it's a small class. I think he only takes 20, 25, I think. I forget what the number is. But he has a whole bunch of people apply. It's hard to get into. It's a lot easier to get people in. Huh?
I tried. Didn't make it. Not this year. Yeah, I didn't make it this year, but hopefully next year.
All right, well, I'll keep my eye on that. So I'll see what I can do. I can't guarantee, man, but
he runs a great class too.
Yeah, fantastic. But FDTN, I mean, there's just so much going on out there. And the other thing is, he's got the facility, man. There's nothing that he can't do up there in that facility. And the people, he gets up there. I mean, you get around guys like Mike Lombardo and Bob Pressler and Jim McCormick and Sandy and all those other guys, man, they are just so phenomenal. So that's what I would do. That's where I would put my money.
Yeah, so, Chief, you've been around a little bit. You've hit a couple different regions in the country, a couple different regions, couple different years. If you had the chance to sit at a kitchen table and have dinner with any firefighters you want, you could pick how big the firehouse is. It could be engine, truck, rescue, chief. Who would it be and why? Kitchen dinner with anybody.
Because I'm from the Northeast, okay, and I'm an old rescue guy, I want to go to a rescue company up in the FDNY.
Okay.
No.
Any firefighters in specific, or just okay?
Yeah, just those companies. I mean, some of the guys, I know by name, because of age and whatever, they've retired and they've kind of moved on. But the guys who are on those companies, man, they're just, they're just hard hitting firefighters. Yeah, I'd like to spend a little bit of time at the kitchen table with them. I'll take my mouth shut so I don't say a single word. I just want to sit there and just soak it in, man. I just want to hear those guys talk and tell stories and, hints and tricks and whatever. But then,
I love that.
As I leave, on my way home, I'm going to drive, because on my way home, I'm going to stop in Cherry Hill and hang for a couple of days.
There you go. That's awesome.
There you go.
Yep. Yeah, I think a rescue company at the FDNY is, where I want to spend some time.
Take me to that dinner with you, Chief.
Yeah, so
yeah,
I can
absolutely.
be a fly in the wall.
So I tell this story, man. I got to tell this story. This is like the pinnacle of my fire service career. So when I was in New Jersey, we used to go up to New York City, just kind of buff around a few firehouses or whatever. So we go to Rescue 1 day. It's like on a Saturday. So we ring the bell and they come out, Say, hey, man, we're on the job down in Jersey and whatever. The guy says, come on in, man, come on in. So we walk into Rescue 1 and we walk through into the kitchen, and the kitchen at Rescue 1, the back wall of the kitchen is actually the front wall of the old firehouse. The old firehouse burnt down. They were able to save the front wall. Now it's the back wall of the kitchen. So we walk in, and this is like a year after they did the rope job. And we walk in, and Kevin Shea is sitting at the table. So we recognize him right away, and he goes, hey, man, you're Kevin Shea. And he's the nicest guy, the most humble guy in the world. He goes, yeah. And he just kind of puts his head down. So we're sitting there, and I can say this because they're retired now. They get a box come in for a fire on a subway platform in Upper Manhattan somewhere, and Rescue 1's on the box. So Kevin Shea looks at us, and he goes, you want to go? And we go, yeah. So he yells over to the lieutenant. He says, hey, man, can we take these guys from New Jersey? They're on the job. And the lieutenant goes, yeah, just tell them to get up front. So we all pile into Rescue 1, and we made a run for a subway fire on Rescue 1 with Kevin Shea.
Man.
That's done.
Yeah, not many people who don't work there can say that.
Yeah.
No.
So I mean, I had quit smoking like 20 years before this happened, man. I was ready to stop and buy a pack of cigarettes and just sit outside and smoke a cigarette. I mean, it was yeah, man. I mean, it was I tell that story every once in a while, man. And I just smile every time I do, man. What an experience! So it goes back to like when we started, man. I mean, I can't believe some of the things that the fire service has, allowed me to do, and the faith that people have put in me, the trust that people have put in me, the opportunities it's given me, the places it's taken me. It's just like, man, it's just unbelievable. People say, this is the best job on the face of the earth. If you don't think it is, go out and find it. Come back and tell me what it is. And I guarantee you won't find anything better than what we get to do. Just that simple.
Yeah.
Chief, do you have any books or any material you recommend to anybody?
Oh man, yeah, I got a ton of books, man. I'm a big reader. I'm sitting over here. I'm looking at my bookshelf. There's so much off the top of my head. I read a lot of Jocko stuff. And I'll say this. Well, I can say this because Jocko doesn't live anywhere near me, so I'm not worried about him breaking my door down and kicking my ass. When you look at what Jocko says, just understand that Jocko's work experience, there's two things that make his environment unique. Number one, he is working, with the end product of one of the most, strenuous selection processes in the military, anywhere on the face of the earth. And the other thing is that everybody who goes to BUDS has the goal of being a SEAL. They want to be a SEAL. We got guys sitting in the firehouse. They couldn't care less if they were a fireman or if they worked for Public Works or if they worked wherever, as long as the paycheck came on time and they get their vacation and they get their pension. So some of the things that Jocko says works really well in his environment, but we got to figure out how we can mold it to fit our environment, because a lot of us are not working for an organization that's got a really stringent selection process, and we're working with folks that sometimes they care and sometimes they don't. So that's one thing about the Jocko stuff. I know Chief Lieb from the FDNY. I think the Cornerstones of Leadership that he wrote is an excellent book. Anybody who has any ambitions whatsoever at all to move up should read that. Corley Moore's book, The 9 L's, is a good book for fire service leaders, written from the perspective of a fire service leader. I just got done reading. I'm looking at it right now. I don't know what the author. I can't figure out the author's name from where I'm sitting, but it's called Legacy, and it's about the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team, and it's about how they went through these transitions to make them into probably the most dominant dominant professional sports team on the face of the earth. I mean, it's just, all the little things they did. They talk about, one of the things in there, they talk about sweeping the shed, which means everybody cleans the locker room. Nobody is above doing the small tasks to get the job done. And they just really kind of go into that. I think that's a really good book. There's another book that I used to give to officers when I promoted them, and it's called Leadership and Training for the Fight, and it's written by Paul Howell, and he's a retired master sergeant that came out of Special Missions Unit, Delta Force in the U.S. Army, and he was on the ground during the Battle of Mogadishu. He's one of the team leaders, of Delta, and he was, boots on the ground in Mogadishu. So if there's anybody who qualifies as an expert for high performance in a high threat situation, you got to give them that. But it's a real easy book to read, and it's written in a way that you can apply it to the fire service. Just not about the military. It's not about, the Army going out and killing folk and winning battles. It's about how you bring people together and perform at a high level in that environment. So that's a really good book. Going Pro by Tony Kern is an excellent book. That book talks about, the levels of professionalism. Like the first level of professionalism is enough where you can make a living, off of what you do. And then that upper level of professionalism is that, you're driven, you have your own standards. He talks about the difference between naive and deliberate practice. I go out in the back and I just practice, thinking that I'm going to get better. And that's just naive practice, because what happens is when we practice a skill and we don't have somebody there coaching us, all we end up doing is practicing the same mistakes we've always made, and we hardwire those mistakes, and that's a big problem. One of the stupidest things I ever did was try to teach myself how to play golf, because I developed all these bad habits, and it wasn't until my wife paid for lessons with a pro, I think for my birthday or maybe Father's Day or something, and it took me so long to unlearn the bad habits that I developed trying to teach myself before the pro could actually help me work on my swing and get it to the point where I was hitting the ball straight. But that talks about the difference between naive and deliberate practice. And then anything that Coyle writes, the culture code, and there's another one that he wrote about performance and training. Huh?
Was it the talent code?
That's it. Yeah. Those two. I mean, and the talent code is real good because he really talks about, the process of hardwiring neural pathways to the point where a task becomes instinctive and reflexive based on the accumulation of myelin in the neurotransmitting pathways. And I'm not that smart. I just read the book. I'm really not that.
You got it down pretty good.
I'm really not that smart, but I read the book. But the talent code. That's a list, man. There's a bunch of reading. But you know what? If you're going to be a professional, you don't read. Tell me what doctor does not read medical journals. Tell me what lawyer does not read law journals. Tell me what professor is not reading journals within their realm of expertise. But we want to call ourselves professionals all day long. Oh, yeah, man, I'm professional. Hell yeah. I got a T-shirt. I walk into Starbucks. They give me 20% off. And I get to go to the firehouse and sit in a recliner all day long. Does that make me a professional? No, not really, bro. You got to read. You got to do all these other things. So that's a list of books that I would highly recommend. And they're good, man. They're good. I've got each one of those books. They're sitting. They're on the other side of the room, man. I've got them highlighted. The pages are all dog-eared, and I got little post-it notes in them or whatever. But if you're going to understand how to work at a high level, you got to do the research, man. You just got to do the research. I mean, there's so many people, they drop down there, they flop into the fire academy and they get their fire officer 1 certification. And it's like, man, I'm made. It's like, man, you're nowhere near it, man. There's so much out there that those programs don't cover that are so important to be able to do this job, man. It's like, don't cheat yourself, And if you took an oath and you swore on a Bible in front of your community that you were going to do your job to the best of your ability, maybe that means you got to read a little bit, And hey, excuse me, I'm an old school guy, man. I read, man. I want to turn those pages and whatever. If you don't like to read, man, every book that I talked about is, available on audio books. Download them on your phone. I mean, guys are sitting around the firehouse for 5 hours watching, the marathon on TV land of the A-Team. Well, shit. Get a set of buds, put them in your ear, download one of these books and sit in the recliner and listen to the book while the other mutts are watching TV. Do something to make yourself a little bit better today than you were yesterday. And if you start doing that as a habit, you're going to make yourself every day. You're going to be a little bit better than you were, and you're going to just keep on getting better and better and better. And the wins and the positive energy are going to carry you through a very successful career.
Wow, I love that, Chief.
That's great.
Yeah, I don't think you can sum up that any better right there. That's just fantastic.
Yep.
I know what my probate's listening to this week.
Yeah, there you go. Turn him loose, man.
So, Chief,
give him my number, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Give him my number.
I absolutely will. He's a great kid. He's coming along really well right now. But this will be a great listen for him. Not because of us, but you've been absolutely hitting home runs for the past every bit of 2 hours.
Well, thanks, man. I hear, I hear guys, these young guys, this and that young generation, and, that bullshit about the plus and minus screwdriver and all that crap that I hear people take. One of the best people I ever hired was a 19-year-old guy, young, respectful, honest, inquisitive, would ask questions the right way because he wanted to understand. I mean, he was phenomenal, man. He stayed with us for a couple of years and he moved on to a larger department, man. When I found out, he came and talked to me, and I knew the chief. I called the chief up and I said, "Hey, man, I hate to do this because I hate to lose a good guy, but if you're hiring, hire this guy, and he's going to do a great job for you." And he moved on and did a great job. But literally, I think when he interviewed, you had to be 19 to be hired. When he interviewed, he was 18 years old. So there's a whole bunch of great people out there that are just, they're just looking to be put in that, right situation, man, so they can flourish, I hear it all the time, like, oh yeah, young guys, whatever, and I say this: if I grow up in New York, in like Brooklyn or the Bronx, and I live in like a 22-story high-rise, do I have a chainsaw in my closet? But if I go to work for the New York City Fire Department, they teach me how to run a chainsaw, don't they? They figure out how to do it. These young guys, this young generation, can that shit, man. Can that. Okay? You can grow up in New York City and never have a drive. You can grow up in New York City, take public transportation to school. The only time you get a driver's license is to get on the fire department. You've never driven a damn car. But you know what? 7 years in, these people are driving aerials in Manhattan. So you tell me that these people aren't trainable? Come on. What world are you living in? They're not trainable because one of two things. Number one, you're either too lazy to train them, or number two, you don't know enough about your job to be able to teach them. So bag that shit. If the fire department meant anything to you, oh, I've loved this place, whatever. Well, guess what? You're not going to be here for 200 years. Those young people that you're shitting on are the future of this organization. So if you care about this organization, you'll learn how to communicate with them, you'll care about them, and you'll position them to be successful so that when you leave, the organization continues to move forward. So other than that, I don't have time for that bullshit that we hear a lot of people squawking about in the firehouse.
Wow, that's amazing. Chief, where can everybody find you? Because everybody needs some more of this. So your social media is, where can everybody get you right now?
Yeah, so I'm on my company, and my company is just me. I don't have like a bunch of guys working for me. It's just me. But I'm the First Line Fire Service Training LLC. I'm on Facebook, and I got an Instagram page, First Line 850 on Instagram.
Outstanding.
And that's where I am. And I'm pretty easy to find, man. So if anybody's got any questions, I always say this, man. I put if you go to Linktree and look for me, I've got a Linktree that's got, a contact form. You can contact me. My email is dennis.firstline@gmail. So you can email me. You can go to my Linktree. It's got links to all the articles I've written, all the podcasts I've been on. Once this gets published, I'll link this to my Linktree. So, if anybody's got any questions, man, reach out. I mean, I'm just here, man. I'm just one guy who's trying to leave it better than I found it. So I'm available. I mean, a selfless plug for my company. I travel. There's organizations that are looking for, some of the things that I talked about that would like me to come in. We can discuss terms and whatever. I travel. I mean, I got a pretty heavy schedule. I'm going to Houston this weekend. I'm going to South Dakota. I'll be in Wisconsin, Ohio, and Louisiana this year. And I got a couple engagements booked in the next year. But I like doing the seminars, but I really like dealing with fire departments where I can kind of come in and, spend like an 8-hour day with your people, really kind of get a feel for where you are, where you want to go, and, kind of tailor stuff to bridge that gap. So just a little plug, man, while we're talking.
I'll have to get you back to Jersey.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Anytime.
We could do a 2-for-1. We'll do a 2-for-1 with my department and Rich's department.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get it tuned up.
Well, now I will say this. There's a reason why I moved to the beach. Okay. Which means if it's snowplow season.
Don't worry, Chief. Tennessee's a lot closer than Jersey, and we don't get much snow.
Okay, man. Yeah. I've got some friends in Tennessee too.
Fair enough. Well, we got a beach, and it's pretty nice in the summertime.
Yeah, we'll get you up here in the summer.
Hey, when it comes right down to it, I mean, if you guys are interested, man, we can make something work, man. We can make something work. There's no problem. I did keep a winter coat or two just in case.
Yeah, you might need it, but we'll get you here in the summertime. A little more temperate. More to do, too.
I'm ready, man. Let's do it.
Sounds like a plan.
Cool.
So, Chief, I think we're gonna keep you on here, but we're gonna cut the recording. But
okay.
I think I speak for all of us. It was an absolute pleasure, and I think you spoke from the heart. You hit a lot of things that all the young guys at the fire stuff have been looking for, and some of the older guys might need to hear. And it's what a great message you dropped for the past 2 hours. I mean, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you guys. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure, and it's an honor to be associated with y'all and try to just help us move in that good direction, man. That's what it's all about, man. We got to leave it better than we found it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
See you guys.